All right, entrepreneurial adventures, starting your own company. I really want to thank Nick and team here at DerpCon. This has been a talk that I've been thinking about putting on for months, and I keep talking to folks, and they're like, "Yeah, oh my gosh, you absolutely should do that." Nobody ever talks about what it's like to start and run one of these things. I mean, we watch Silicon Valley on HBO. We hear people talking about it on Twitter. You see announcements of these large raises. What does it actually take? And so I appreciate y'all because it was sort of a last kind of like, wait a second, what if I did this? And they were gracious enough to accept my talk. So this is me. I've done a bunch of things. I'm known for the unicorn outfits, among a lot of other costumes that I actually wear on stage. Um, Oops, wrong way. Okay, so quick disclaimers. First of all, I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. And I'm not even the best entrepreneur I know. So I don't know everything. And that's step one is nobody knows everything. And why the title of this talk with Blink at Zelda, nobody does it alone. And so with that, I went out and sought advice and different elements from a ton of entrepreneurs that you know. And so some of those will be seeded through the talk where I thought that they said it better than me and are good references. And then at the end of these slides, which Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I'm going to be able to share my slides. Um, if not, I will put them out there on Twitter, LinkedIn, and everywhere. But at the end, past the slideshow that I'm not going to do, I put together quotes and different summaries of recommendations from a lot of entrepreneurs like Ron Gula, who co-founded Tenable, John Strand from Black Hills, Jake Williams from Edition Security, Katie Masuris from Luda Security, Haroon Mir with Thinks Canary, Casey Ellis from Bug Crowd, Chris Trunser from 40 North, and I'm probably even missing a few folks. Oh, Tim Medine from Red Siege, of course, who gave an awesome talk earlier at DerpCon on assumed breach approaches. So I've started 3 different companies. Um, 7 years ago, I started Grim by myself. I put an asterisk there, but you can see my 2 coworkers there on the yellowish, goldenish couch where January 2013, I sat on that couch and went, all right, day one, what do I do? Those were my coworkers. Um, then a few years ago, I co-founded a nonprofit. That's the ICS Village. So we've been a mainstay at DEF CON. That was us incorporating around an effort that a lot of folks have been pushing for a long time. And we realized we needed to step it up in a different direction. And then in 2016, Fortune 50 came to Grim with a particular problem. And that's where we realized that they had just handed us a product idea, which at the time we called Crossbow. We renamed it to Scythe. Um, and part of my growing process of learning about the different kinds of businesses, I realized that I needed to bring in investors to help me. And that's where we created Scythe. And we jokingly call Scythe WordPress for malware, but it's an adversarial emulation platform. Allows a common build, development, and operations platform for any permutation of malware you can imagine. So, first question, why do you want to do this to yourself? There's the asterisk again because we see all of these people. First, this is not an easy road. Being an entrepreneur is hard. You will have moments of doubt. You will have moments where you're just like, I can't believe I did this to myself. I can't believe, how do I get out of bed? What am I doing? But that's not the whole equation. If you have family, they are a part of this journey as well. Your friends, you won't see your friends for a while. So really need to think through what is going to be the impact of this. Second, this is the startup curve. When you first start off on this journey, you are going to have that honeymoon period of the initial enthusiasm. And so the first thing I want to orient is I always put references at the bottom of all of my slides. So particularly once I share these, you will have direct links to everything that I have. And these always go to more articles. So on any particular topic, you can go on a deep dive and go down as far as you want. So the honeymoon period. This is awesome. I am so excited that I no longer have my 9 to 5 job. I no longer have that terrible boss I hate. I'm getting to pursue and do it my way, my thing. And that's going to last for a certain period of time. I can tell you my initial honeymoon phase was 3 months. Then reality set in. And I was like, oh shit, what did I just do to myself? And how long is it going to take to get out of this? Because you don't know everything. And the key part is they always talk about failing fast. It's iterating through, and here we call it experimenting and pivoting to start to see, well, what works? And you're going to have some false starts. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the slideshow where we talk about there are different kinds of clients. And at some point, this idea is going to work or it's not. Starting and running a business is like being a predator on the plains of Serengeti in Africa. You are going to be hungry, you are going to be thirsty, and there's going to be nothing to eat or drink. And you just have to survive long enough to get through this experiment, pivoting, and things starting to work for it to take off. And this initial part here that we've highlighted in blue, this is typically what the seed funding of what you're going to do. So if we're going primarily for a product startup and we decide to make that step about taking a raise, and we're going to talk through that in a lot of detail here in a few minutes, this is effectively what that raise is supposed to accomplish. You want to get enough money to fund your ability to learn to your point where you have something called product market fit. Now I need to look at my next round because I want to go with velocity and scale to double down on a go-to-market approach. And like I said, we're going to talk more about that later. But these are the two initial questions of understanding why do you want to do this to yourself and to your friends and your family? And what exactly does this psychologically feel like? Because that initial dip is hard and you're down at that bottom for a long time. So to be an entrepreneur requires two principles. Passion. You should be pursuing an idea that it pains you that it doesn't exist. It hurts that nobody has done this yet. It is so obvious. It is so wonderful. Why has nobody else pursued this? And each day that it doesn't exist is a little itch that bothers you. The second, you need to have tolerance for bullshit. We all take for granted when we're in a company, and particularly large companies, that all of those HR and accounting and all of those departments in the back office, they are there for a reason. They do all of this administrative work. And when you are the founder, that all comes to you. There is no, at the end of the day, looking at me like, oh, who do I pass? Oh, it's me. You are both the CEO and the janitor. If the bathroom needs to be cleaned, you better do it because there's nobody else who will. Now, notice what's not on the slide. You don't have to be brilliant. Being a genius probably doesn't hurt, but it's not a requirement. And also, money. Don't do this for money. Because when you have those hard days, when you're at the bottom of that trough of the startup cycle, money is not going to be what gets you out of the bed and still has you get back, go at it, and try to succeed. So, all right, what's the idea? A lot of folks get very secretive about this part. They're scared to share it. If I share this idea, someone else is going to steal it. And that could be true. What I always told myself is if somebody else can do it better than me, I shouldn't be doing it. But more importantly, you have to go and experiment and learn. I mean, if you were your only customer, that would work, but it turns out you're not. This is where engineers create brilliant ideas in basements, and then the second they go to market, everyone's like, well, nobody wants that. So talk to people, then talk to more people, and have those people introduce you to more people and go talk to them. So common theme here, network, talk, share. Nobody can help you unless you ask for help. And by talk, I mean listen. I have talked to numerous entrepreneurs who share their pitch deck with me, and they of course, you know, they're so passionate about their idea. They want to share their idea. And why don't I get their idea? I've seen a ton of pitch decks. I've talked to a ton of entrepreneurs. I talk to my fellow entrepreneurs all the time. I'm constantly looking at market trends and what's happening and what's not. You'd be surprised at the patterns of both the ideas and what works and what you see, as well as just packaging the idea. And we're going to talk about that later, which is what should go into a pitch deck. The best technology doesn't win. For those of you who've never heard that before, it's true. For those of you who have heard it before, it's very true. The best tech doesn't win. We see this over and over again. So don't get focused on that. You really are building a business here. The tech might be what underpins your idea, might be what makes it a reality. But that value proposition, why a customer buys it, what's solving their problems, their challenges, and making their lives better, that's the key element there. And the business that can scale to have that be repeatable. In the beginning, you are going to be a large part of your business. At some point, that business is not going to be about you anymore if it's successful. And then finally, there's this idea of, okay, minimum viable product. What do I need to build? How far does the idea need to progress before somebody will pay me money for it? Before somebody will take a chance and say, we'd like to see where that can go. Because in the beginning, they're not buying your product because your product solves everything and is wonderful. They're buying that product because they believe in you, they believe in your team, they believe in your vision of where you are going to take that. There are a number of customers out there who are absolutely happy to work with you because they see how investing in your idea makes the whole industry better. So, business types. Fundamentally, there are two types of businesses: products and services. I am still surprised how many times I have to explain to folks that there are these two kinds of businesses, because understanding how you want to make money is going to be fundamental to what you do. So it starts with services. Services is a consultancy. Service is an engineering firm. I have FTEs, full-time equivalents, employees who are going to be paid to do work. Whatever that work is, doesn't matter. The economic model is, I'm going to be paid for the direct manual labor that I produce. I might use products to make that labor better, but I am paid on a project, I am paid on an hour. So 1 hour of effort, 1 unit of measurement of human effort earns that same amount of money. Now, notice we're not talking about, well, you could get $20 an hour, you could get $2,000 an hour. Those are just different multiples around the fact that the economics is that that unit of measurement of human expenditure is the business. Whereas a product, there is no relation like that. A product gets paid whatever somebody's willing to pay for it. And you could spend 10,000 hours, you could spend 1 hour. Whatever somebody is willing to pay based on what they see that value proposition is, that's your economic model. So we're going to do this. First thing we need to do is we need to incorporate. You have to create a legal structure. The core legal structures in the United States are a limited liability company, an S corporation, and a C corporation. Not going down the lawyer track here. In short, LLC is great for consultancies and service-based businesses that are simple. It works really well when it's you and maybe 1 or 2 partners. And the corporate models are there to create shares so that there is a way for you to distribute that economics into raising money. Check name availability. There's nothing worse than trying to go with a company that already has a name that exists or a very similar name. I could tell you when I started Grim, I tried to get the domain for grim.com and found that that, of course, had been taken in the 90s. And I was like, okay, well, what kinds of permutations could I get? And I ended up having a domain conflict with a hairdresser in South Africa. I'm seriously not making that up. Then there's this concept of DBA, doing business as. So whatever my legal entity is, and that legal entity is going to be established with government, I can still have a trade name. So for example, with Grim, our legal entity is called SMFS Inc. And anybody ever wants to know what that stands for, I will tell you some other place because it gets a little a little too colorful. And then the doing business as is Grimm. And so there's the legal entity, the name of record with the government, that's our official name, and then we're able to use a trade name to sort of short circuit things. So you can have one that can be particularly esoteric, so you don't have name collision, and then use the trade name. You need to register with the IRS. They will give you an employee identification number. This is the equivalent of a social security number for a business. So this is your unique identifier with them, that this is who I am. You have to do the same thing with state. You have to do the same thing with local, county. In terms of choosing which state to incorporate with, the ones that are considered clever. So Delaware is considered the de facto corporate friendly state. They have a lot of rules that you'll notice a ton of companies that you see are all incorporated in Delaware, and that all has to go down to the way that the state regulations make it very friendly to start a business in Delaware. The other two that are in that vein have similar business-friendly regulations for incorporation are Nevada and Wyoming, that have some of their own twists. And then last, if you want to do business with US government, this is free, it's not hard to do. It's something that's really easy to set up now, and if you ever need it, you can, and then you can worry about how hard it is to do business with government, is SAM, that's sam.gov. You create what's called a cage code. That's their own unique identifier for their contracting system. And then Dun & Bradstreet, which is the same kind of thing. They're broader than US government. There are large commercial enterprises that will check your DUNS number to see how long you've been in business and your financial credibility, but it's the same kind of thing, the DUNS number. All of these are, of course, legal requirements, and the reason that they're there is that all of these organizations want to get their share of what you make. So this is for taxation purposes, this is for permit purposes, this is for licensing purposes. All right, starting a company with your best friend. So this is something a lot of folks do, is they start companies with friends, with people they know. The first thing that I would start is, okay, make sure that everyone's clear are, what are your roles? Who's doing what? What are the expectations of those roles? A common mistake that's given is that equity is granted 50-50 or just distributed equally at the very beginning of when you create the company. There's no requirement that equity is determined when you start the business. You can decide amongst yourselves that, let's wait. Let's see where this progresses in a year. Let's see if things change, what happens. And then based on us all agreeing to look backwards at what has actually happened, who did what, then we can determine what that equity might be. And also, what does success look like? What do we want to do? And revisiting that is great. And then of course, there's the downside of this, which is what happens if the company dissolves? What happens if we go bankrupt? What happens if somebody wants to quit? What if somebody wants to leave? What should we do about that? Okay, to raise or not to raise, that is the question. So in short, based on your economic model is primarily going to dictate whether or not you should raise. If you are a services business, going back to that, the economics of being a services business, probably not. And the reason for that is that it's very hard for an investor to get the multiples that they're looking for out of a service business that is always going to be tied directly to direct human labor. Whereas a product company, possibly so. Part of this also is from a founder perspective of how much control versus growth do you want to have? If you want to start a lifestyle company that is profitable from day one, organically and slowly grows, don't take somebody else's money. Maintain that control. There's no reason to bring them in. You're going to be making money from day one. Do that. I will tell you, Grimm did not raise money. Grimm, we grew organically because as we earned more money, we hired more people and we just organically grew with that. Haroon has a fantastic video, which I linked to here, talking about bootstrapping ego. And he talks a lot about how the environment influence us to think that raising is normal and raising is what we have to do. You don't have to raise. In my particular case, I incubated the idea of Scythe inside Grimm for 2.5 years. We spent our own money doing research and development because we were a profitable consultancy. We believed in the idea. We didn't need to go get money. And what we did is we built it up to a minimum viable product through hundreds of discussions with customers over that time period. And then I realized that I personally, as the founder, had a gap. I had no experience bringing commercial software to the market. And I went out and brought in investors, and I'm very lucky with the investors that I brought on. But I was very specific with these investors about what I wanted to do, and bringing in investors who could help me short circuit that lack of experience that I had. That was more important to me than the money. I had the money, I produced the money to take the product to market, but I didn't have the expertise to do it correctly from my view. So the types of investors. So venture capital types, there really are loosely two kinds. You're going to find those that are the typical VC funds that you're used to seeing in the news. And then there's these private equity funds. And it's really hard because in the very beginning, as a young founder, you can't tell the difference. One 23-year-old analyst that cold calls you out of nowhere and says, hey, I've heard you have a company. Are you interested in raising? I'd like to book 30 minutes to talk to you. Looks the same as another 23-year-old analyst calling you out of nowhere doing the same thing. But they are really different depending on what kind of company that they are. And it behooves you in that process to really push back and understand what kind of raises do they do, because a lot of the private equity folks are going to be much more mature companies that have stable ARR, which is the amount of annual revenue that you're earning and can expect to earn. And they're more late stage raises. And so when you go and meet them and you're like, I'm not there. Like I'm looking to do a seed raise. I've got this really cool idea. I've got 2 customers who are piloting it with me. No, I'm not making any money. I'm pre-revenue. And they're like, well, we only write $20 million checks with companies that are making $5 million a year. Like I didn't need to get on a phone and waste my time with you for 30 minutes to hear that. More typical investors that are going to be closer to you are going to be angels. So these are other entrepreneurs and business folks who are going to be willing to write smaller checks. So this could be, hey, here's $5,000, here's $50,000. Friends and family are a great way to help you get up and going. And then on more of a process side, there are incubators, and these are different folks, and pretty much every major city around the United States is going to have an incubator of some type. And they're going to be a process of some period of time where you come in, they provide you space, they'll provide you folks to talk to, they'll make relationship and introductions, and they will help walk you through getting you off the ground and where to go. And then another option that I wanted to throw out there is the Small Business Innovation and Research Fund with the US government. This is a very phased process for getting an initial grant of money. It's non-dilutive, so they're not taking equity, but they're going to invest in your idea and then help you find places inside the US government that that idea might be of interest, and they will provide you a little bit of cash. Typically, a phase 1 is about $50,000. Phase 2 is about $150,000, and phase 3 is $750,000. So, I mean, not enough to completely just, quit your job and run away, but good money to get started with getting help selling in, and they do not make you go through all of the complicated chicanery of traditional government contracting. All right. So you're going to raise, you've decided to do this. So this 5-step component of the pitch deck is from Ron Gula, and I have a link down here to his blog. And he highlights the 5 key things that he looks for in a pitch deck, starting with what? What is the problem? And you need to be able to distill this down into 1 slide. How are you going to solve this problem? What is your solution? Your proof. So do you have customers? What are some examples? Why do you think that your solution is solving this problem? Funding. What do you need? Okay, you're making a pitch to me as an investor saying that you've got this greatest thing to solve this problem. what are you asking from me? What do you want? How much do you want? Going back to that earlier slide where we talked about the startup cycle, you should be projecting the amount of money and definitely give yourself 6 to 12 months of extra runway because nothing ever goes as quickly as you think it's going to be able to get to that point of that initial raise to product market fit, right? We have learned enough to understand that people are willing to pay this much for this kind of thing. Your vision, what is the schedule and the milestones and the minimum viable product that you're looking for? And then at the asterisk that I added at the end is your team. For a young company that's starting and asking for money, I believe 50% of the pitch is you and your leadership team. And the reason for that is that you don't really know. You have a good idea, you think you understand some level of the problem, but you are going to learn so much in the next 6 months, the next year, the next 5 years. And really what matters is what's your team's ability to have experience to be as close to right as possible and your ability to be agile, your ability to react and to change based on what you're learning from the environment, because you're going to have to grow and adapt. Your idea turns out, should have gone this way and not that way. I'll give you a great example with Scythe. When we built our platform, one of the things that we thought was really cool about it is, hey, it's modular. You can build your own things. You don't need to come back to us to wait for us to produce threats. Here's a software development kit. Sounds great on paper, except we built that software development kit only in C language. Turns out, and I hope a whole bunch of you are laughing at home because of the stupidity of that statement, we figured out that turns out not a lot of people can write C, and that's a problem. So that really cool killer feature that we thought we had did not match reality of the marketplace. It did based on our experiences, but turns out was not the right experience. And so our ability to understand that, come to terms with that, and adapt to make that change is really key. And that is, like I said, I think half of the pitch deck is really you being able to show that who you are, what your team is, why it makes sense, and how you're going to be able to project that. The process, so every cishet white male founder will tell you, hold on, sorry, the GoToWebinar blocks me from reading that, will tell you probably will not work if you're not in that group. I am a cishet white male founder. So what I wanted to highlight here from Katie is, yeah, there are going to be different experiences for different folks, and certainly underrepresented minorities have a much harder time. I'm not saying that my time is easy, but I understand that I have certain benefits that made it easier for me. And a lot of that is that the investment community is very insular. First, there is definitely a Silicon Valley bias. Most VCs are very West Coast centric. They're very Valley centric. I live on the East Coast. I live in Virginia. I come out of the Washington, D.C. area. And when I was trying to raise money on my initial raise, I could get a few West Coast VCs to talk to me. But the first question they asked me was, are you going to move to San Francisco? It's like, no, I'm not going to move to San Francisco. I'm here. My family's here. Why? It doesn't change my idea. My customers aren't necessarily in San Francisco, but from them, they wanted you to be there. If I'm going to give you money, I want you here. The other challenge is the very male-centric nature of this game. The tech bros. They invest in people that look like them. They invest in people that have that culture and talk that way. And then the other part of it is, of course, going back to earlier where we talked about network, a lot of this happens based on relationships. Turns out people don't just write large checks based on a PowerPoint. They're going to really want to understand, to know you, to know your references, to talk to other folks who know you, who've seen this, who've seen the product. And so it takes a lot of effort, and there are a lot of barriers to entry that are difficult and become even more so if you represent part of someone that's outside of the circle, so to speak. And Katie really highlighted this well with this, which is why I included it in here.
So perfect.
Sorry.
Perfect timing, Bryson. Actually, you've been great. No pauses, so I haven't been able to interrupt you with questions. So we've got a couple questions in the Discord before you get a little too far about some of the government stuff. Jill Auger asked, to do U.S. government work, do you need both Cage Code and DUNS?
Yes.
That was a sweet answer. Yes. All right. And does SBIR, can't pronounce it, so does that contribute money to services-based businesses or product only?
Um, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I believe they are only looking at product companies. They're not interested in services because services are not an innovation. It's not like you've created some new metahuman that's going to be able to do something differently, and that's what you're contracting. Most government expenditures are through traditional contracting for services. That's where the expression butts and seats comes from, because it's a contract that comes out and it's like, we want 50 people to do this thing. And after that, you're just providing 50 people to do that thing. So I'm 99% sure that CIBR does not cover services.
Awesome. And then the last question we got so far is, can you get the SAM registration and cage code even when you are a startup and your salary is practically inexistent?
Yes, you do not need, you don't need anything other than to have already been a legal entity. So if you've incorporated, you've registered, you have a license, that's it. You can be zero revenue, zero everything, and that's all it takes to get a cage code.
Awesome. Thanks, Bryson. Back to you.
Thanks. Yeah, please feel free. Throw those questions out, and by all means interrupt, because I think it really helps to get the questions answered as you flow. So yeah, please do. You've decided to, you've going through the raise, you put your pitch deck together, you're going to get capital. So it's like getting married. That company, those people who are investing in you, you are now inextricably linked for some period of time. The average age that VCs have told me numerous times has been that they're expecting to be with you for 10 years. That's the average of how long they're going to be with you. So you better figure out if you like them. Do you want to work with this person? Do your own reference checking. Just because somebody offers you money does not mean you have to take it. And this is again where I like to say I'm very lucky that the folks that I decided to close my first raise with were folks that I vetted and have been fantastic to work with. But get a prenuptial. So the prenuptial is, what is the structure for this money? And the two common approaches are convertible notes or equity. A convertible note is effectively turning the investment into a loan that at a future point in time will be converted into equity. Equity is direct shares. I own a percentage of this company. And I didn't talk about market valuation in this conversation because honestly, market valuation is more art than science. If you're pre-revenue, right, it's just whatever finger in the air people think you are worth and what it's going to be worth after they put in money. And there's just a lot to basically what you can argue you think something's worth, and that's going to be what underpins both the note and the equity. Who are you taking that money from and why, we discussed, and then what are their roles? Most investors don't have a formal role. The top investors are going to be the ones that are going to be on your board, which gives them legal authority as a part of, going back to earlier, we talked about control of a company. So there's directors. Those are folks who actually can make an opinion, a legal opinion as a part of your company. And as that grows with you bringing in more investors at that level and you drop below 50%, now you have more of a plurality of leadership, and that comes with its own pluses and minuses. Investors can also be observers. That means they have no legal authority as a part of the board, but they have the ability to sit at the board meeting. So they're allowed to listen, they're allowed to talk, they're just not a part of the official vote. And so planning who should be a part of your board, how big that should be. Obviously, my advice would be to keep that as small as you can. Certainly, if you're going to be taking further capital later in additional rounds, that board is going to grow. And so if you started with 10 people at your board early on and you find yourself then having to deal with renting out an auditorium to run your board meeting, you're not going to be happy. Addressable market. This question is going to come up from every investor you ever talk to. And they're just like, well, how big is the opportunity, right? I'm hearing that this is the Uber of toasters, but how big is that? And for the most part, you're not going to know, and neither are they. More what they're interested in the very beginning is your ability to show the process of your thinking. You identify that first customer type, you identify another customer type, and then a third customer type. And you're like, okay, well, these are the different colors of customers that I see in my market, and they're willing to pay these amounts of money, which gives me my addressable market. This is the bottoms up approach that I highly recommend. I can tell you, it took me many years to figure this out for myself. I had always sort of waved my hand at it and quoted general figures like, well, Gartner says vulnerability management's a $4 billion market. All right, well, that's hand wavy and doesn't mean anything. Who in vulnerability management of what type is willing to pay what for what I'm selling at some point? That's the level that you will need to get to. At the very beginning, you're not going to be there, and it's unreasonable for an investor to really poke you hard, and they're not going to for the most part. They just want to understand your thinking. So economics. I see my animation didn't completely do that. So first up is the economics of people. So starting with, people don't just cost their wages. What I pay someone for an hourly salary is not what somebody costs. So there are additional components of what somebody costs. Starting with is fringe. What benefits am I offering that individual? 401k, health insurance, FSA, commuter benefits, $700 of tacos for free every Tuesday. Those are all part of the fringe benefits that are a part of the cost. General and administration and overhead. So the difference here is that G&A is the overall cost of having a business. So if I have an office, if I'm running, I have an accountant who's running my books for me. Whereas overhead is project specific costs. We needed an office for that customer. We needed to buy 3 copies of IDA Pro for that customer and that project. And the key here is that you're coming up with a multiple that you can now start to look and understand, because this is going to give you an idea of what a person costs, which you can start to extrapolate to how much money are you spending on a monthly basis, which is a key number to have in your head. And then also can give you an idea of what does somebody cost to hire. So there's no right answer to this. Typical ranges are for the very low end, very low, manual labor, not complicated, few benefits. You're looking at a multiple of about 1.3 to 1.4. Average white collar tech is going to be somewhere between 1.6 and 1.8. 2x and above is going to be a company with great benefits. You have very highly skilled folks. You need that level of benefits to attract that level of talent and to keep them. So typically you're looking at probably around 2-ish to 2.3, 2.4.
Awesome, Bryson. We got a couple questions that came through as well. One of them came from the GoToWebinar, and it said, "Is there a formula for addressable market?"
That's the formula.
Yeah.
Customer types times how much they're willing to pay. So, for example, the blue unicorn represents, I don't know, I'm gonna have to make something up here because I'm cell phone users, and cell phone users are willing to pay $10 per license. And the red unicorn represents desktop users, and they're willing to pay $50 a license. And then the purple is folks who only want to consume it in the cloud, and they're willing to pay $25 a license. And then the question is, well, how many of these people exist? An example, all right, I'll share one example with a little bit of data from my own personal experience. So, for example, we built a product that we sell to enterprise red teams. Well, turns out there aren't that many enterprise red teams in the entire world. I mean, I would probably guess that there are 2,000 to 3,000 red teams in the world. Red teaming is not a large market. So what would a red team be willing to pay for something times the fact that there are only potentially 2,000 to 3,000 is an example of a very specific enterprise red team addressable market. So does that help answer it a little bit better?
For me, that definitely did. I believe she said tax. I believe, yeah. I mean, I believe it did. We have a couple other ones. Do you have any thoughts for getting started as a subcontractor in government contracting, or any experience getting on government contract vehicles?
Yeah, so first of all, as a young company, you are not getting a prime contract. You will not, I mean, everything, nothing in this world is absolute, right? So it's not like this can never happen, but it is highly, highly unlikely for you to get a direct contract from the US government because of the amount of overhead burden for administration and contracting and finances and system that you have to have in place and have certified to earn a contract. Not saying it can't be done, but you will. It's not easy. Most likely, you're going to subcontract to a prime contractor. So we all know the big system integrators: Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, L3 Harris, folks like that. Those they have the really big contracts. And what you'll need mostly is a relationship with somebody in one of those who's willing to bring you on a team that either already exists, which means there's already funded work, or more likely will bring you in to put you on a proposal. And key there is make sure that you get a very specific amount of work share written down. Because I can't tell you how many times that you help them win that contract and they're like, yeah, we're not giving it to you. That happens all the time. Make sure you get it in writing. So being a subcontractor to a prime contractor is the way you're going to have to go for some period of time until you build up a whole bunch of the back office and the capabilities to go and win a contract directly with the government yourself.
Awesome, thank you. We have a few more that keep coming in now. Do you have any favorite resources for learning about sales, pitching the idea?
Sills.
Sales, or like pitching the idea to probably a potential customer or client.
We are going to be going through client acquisition shortly.
Cool. Another one, do your cost multipliers 1.3x to 2.4x account for taxes?
Yes. So
Cool.
taxes are going to be something that's inside your general administrative part.
Awesome. Back to you.
So hiring, you're not going to be running out and getting a recruiter for the most part to start. You're going to be working with, people, right? You have friends, you have contacts, you have acquaintances, putting that word out. Hey, we're the latest thing on the street. We're looking for these kinds of people. People recommend them. The biggest thing that people make a mistake on in the beginning is giving folks higher rank than they should have. Hey, this is our president of this, and this is our senior vice president of this. And it's like you're a 3-person company. What happens when you suddenly are 200 people in 4 years, and turns out your buddy who was senior vice president of sales has no idea how to run a sales organization of 70 people across 3 continents. So it can be something where it's better to start low and work your way up to it and let it scale with your organization. Incentives are key. I can tell you it was really interesting to me when I started Grim, and we were 4 people, and we'd extend an offer to somebody to hire, and they'd be like, well, how much equity am I getting? And I was like, dude, you're not bringing anything to the table. You're going to come in, you're getting well paid, you have great benefits, there's bonuses. You bring equity is sweat and blood. Equity is the core of this business. Equity is you bringing a multiple to the business. Coming in and doing a job that you're well compensated for does not earn equity. And so that's a challenge that you're going to find, but you do want folks incentivized for this. And so certainly for me, at all the companies I've had, we used options, which basically is tying to, hey, we're going to value the company at this point today. Based on the growth of that and how long you stay here, you are going to be eligible for an amount of what the difference in that valuation is. So an example could be traditional option grants would be, we're going to give you 1,000 options today. They're going to be valued at, let's make it simple, $1. And it's going to vest over 4 years. So for the first year, you have to work here for at least a year. Once you hit that 1-year mark, 25% of that value you now own legally. And then it's going to approach 100% over the following 3 years. And what that means is, for whatever that is that you own, from that $1 original strike price, any growth in valuation, that delta is how much you've made off of the value of the company. So it's aligning folks to being a part of the company. You're not necessarily ceding control, and they're part of that. And then of course there's bonuses. Bonuses is based on what we're doing here. We're going to give you some amount of cash or some kind of benefit. Benefits, where I talked about the buck stops here. You are going to learn more about administrative HR things than you ever wanted to know as an entrepreneur. You're going to need to have written policies, making sure that you cover what is a holiday, what is vacation or paid time off, what about sick leave, what about maternity or paternity leave, what about hiring or firing, health insurance. Health insurance is, I don't even know how to like cover the fact that you're going to have to learn about health insurance, all the different kinds of health insurance, all the different kinds of providers, what plans are available in what states, 401k, whether to offer that or not, matching or not. And then I put this in here. I have never used a PEO. I've talked to them a number amount of times, but effectively a professional employer organization is it's like a back office company that does all of this stuff for you. And how it works is your company and your employees essentially become their employees, which is how all of the back office and everything is extended to you, and they do that all for you for a fee, of course, but you still operate your own company independently. So it's really a legal convenience to providing lots of benefits. Back office, you need to consider contracts, legal, human resources, how you're going to do payroll, accounting. Hire an accountant. You need somebody independent who really knows what they're doing. The only owner that I know that does his own accounting, but he has the background in it, is Tim Medine at Red Siege. And then business insurance. So going back into that same question that I got earlier about does taxes fit in G&A? Business insurance is a part of G&A. And what you need is you need insurance that's going to cover loss of property, injury, liability, errors and omissions, right? If I make a mistake as a consultant to something to a client, I have protection that I can pay out if they sue me. And the good or the bad news is, depending on which way you look at it, is most large procurement shops are going to dictate the exact amounts of exact types of insurance that you need in the terms of the contract. So my recommendation would be don't worry about business insurance until you get that first contract from an organization, and then run out to an insurance provider. It'll take you a few days and get the exact amount that you're required, and then you'll just layer it on there as you continue to do business. The actual office, certainly in current times, nobody's really doing much from an office, but this is a consideration. I can tell you from all of my companies, we spent several years working remotely before we decided to get office space when it became necessary. So it was not an expenditure that we felt we needed to make until we needed to do it. And there's different kinds of space, right? Of course, there's the dedicated office space where you have your own space and you're the only one there. As much challenge as WeWork and like companies have had, the shared space model can be of interest. And then we talked about incubators earlier. Incubators can also offer space. There are challenges with working remotely or working from home. How do you maintain and grow a culture? How well can that scale? How do you keep the team together and feeling like they're a part of everything? When you look at employees and different kinds of employees, what kinds of equipment and software do they need? Where do you store that? How do you deliver it? How do you administer that? Now we start getting into, of course, IT administration and our ability to deliver that to new employees on time and bringing them up to speed, because of course, almost every employee these days can't actually do their job without the right computer equipment. Intellectual property. So there are 4 kinds of intellectual property to consider. If you are going to be building a product, of course, intellectual property is key because that's effectively what you're building. Intellectual property is also of interest to a founder because you are now monetizing an idea. You are creating it as like an asset. It is now a thing. And that's part of what gives value to your company. This, of course, is where I knock on the door and say, talk to a lawyer. This is very much legal area, but high level patents go through the U.S. Patent and Trade Office. I am formally declaring either a process or a detail of what I'm building. So recognize that whatever you're sharing through that patent office is going to be publicly discoverable. You will be sharing what you're doing. Now you have protections around it, but anybody else can see exactly what you're doing, as opposed to something like a trade secret, where a trade secret is this is the proprietary information of how we do something or what we built that we're not sharing. You don't have those same legal protections. Trademarks and copyright. Trademark is like a logo, right? This is our logo. Nobody else can copy this. That's something you want to worry about a lot at the beginning. And then copyright, which you see at the bottom of tons of web pages and blog posts. A copyright is just protecting artistic materials and I'm sorry, like written materials.
All right, Bryson, we've got a handful of other questions. I also want to give you a 10-minute mark here. I don't know what you've got left in your talk. Do you want to answer those questions now or hold them off
Yes,
towards the
let's
end?
do it.
Okay, cool. All right, so if someone who has a consulting business is reaching out to you to be their technical person, should you have an LLC for yourself? And can you be a one-man business and contract yourself?
Yes, so you can do that. Being an LLC is certainly a great way to formalize that, to create some distance from you personally. But in that kind of instance, you can be paid directly through 1099. So that's the formal contracting method that they would use to contract with you and pay you. And you do not need a legal entity to enter into that relationship. That's you directly doing that through that 1099 vehicle.
Awesome, thanks. And then we've got one in the GoToWebinar. As a part of board member, what are roles or decisions an investor can take? Will they take part in day-to-day decisions?
So you do not want your board to be part of day-to-day decisions. There are going to be things, and these should be listed in your articles of incorporation. That's going to be part of where you establish your business with the states that I talked about earlier. You are going to dictate, here's the rules of how the business operates. Here's what requires board consent and approval. So that document will dictate the legal details of that. Your board should be there for strategy. At the end of the day, you, the founder, the CEO, are responsible for operations. Nobody else is. Whatever the board says or thinks or whatever, they're not the ones that when that board meeting is over has to go and live with trying to build what was talked about. You do. And so one of the biggest mistakes that CEOs and founders make is they let the board run them. The board is there to help you. The board is there to guide you. The board is there to bounce ideas off and give advice, make connections, establish relationships. They are not there to tell you how to do your job.
Awesome. And then we've got one more question. If someone who has a consulting business is reaching out to you to be their technical person, I think, should you have an else? I think I already asked that. Never mind, we're good.
You asked that.
Sorry. We're good. Back to you.
All right, cool. So how to get clients, right? So first step, of course, is acquisition. The fancier term for this when you're looking at products is go to market, right? How am I going to market to have this process from identifying leads to closing those leads and them becoming customers, and then of course renewing those leads or growing them. There's no simple answer to this, right? This is part of this is marketing, part of this is market education. What are you? What is your value proposition? That is the biggest key here, is distilling what you have that is solving someone else's problem. Don't take it for granted that you understand their problem, because it's not as simple as, well, you're Nike and your job is to make shoes. And so your biggest challenge is understanding how to make as many wonderful shoes as possible. Who the person you're talking to in that organization is going to have their own agenda. This is something I personally learned is I figured that go to market as a young company was simple. Be a charismatic founder, have an awesome product, match that against somebody else who had a need and a budget. Sounds simple, sounds wonderful. First problem, that doesn't scale. There's only so much founder, so much Bryson, so much whatever to go around. That's why you start to build out salespeople in that element, or business development people in consulting. And so being able to really refine what it is that can go into that process is key, and understanding what's on the other side and matching it to those agendas. A great book that my sales folks made me read last year was called Strategic Account Selling, and it basically taught how you have to look at the each client as an overall like chessboard of all of these different roles and components. In the very beginning, you can keep it simple, but that doesn't scale. Procurement and contracts, there's fundamentally two kinds of contracts you're going to come into contact with. Everybody's familiar with NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. I call these contractual tissue paper. For the most part, you're just looking to see, hey, do we both agree that we're not going to steal each other's information and share it? That's the basic you're looking for there. Then to the contract for the work. So what is the scope? What are the expectations? And that's the biggest thing that I see where most projects or contracts, whatever you want to call them, fail, is that expectation management is off. No client has ever known since the history of humankind what exactly they want on day one. Part of it is you being with them along on the journey of making sure that you're staying aligned with what they expect. Don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to admit a mistake and say you were wrong and address it. I have made numerous mistakes. I've had folks working with me make numerous mistakes. And the key that we had is almost all of the time we recognized it, we admitted it, and we corrected it as quickly as possible. Client types. So in that very beginning slide where we talked about the experimenting and the pivoting and the false starts, not all clients are good clients, particularly if you're building a product. You don't want to customize a product so far for one client, no matter how wonderful that logo looks, no matter how much money they're willing to pay, that you suddenly find yourself down a rabbit hole with tons of time, tons of money and resources spent with nothing to show for it, or something that can't scale to other customers. So not every client is a good client. And that's really hard to say because it's very specific to what you're trying to do and where you're at. And then this is the thing that I found the strangest, and I can't tell you how many times again I've been in this position, but earning the work, executing the work, delivering the work was never the hardest part. Getting paid for doing all of that was the hardest part. I have had many times where we would do everything and it was awesome, and the client just would not pay us for lots of reasons. And the short answer is most of them are large corporations. They know that they're going to take their time. It's a back office function of folks that are accounts payable to pay you. Do not be afraid to pick up the phone. Do not be afraid to harass them. More importantly, you have a relationship with somebody who wanted your help and wants to work with you most likely in the future, who's in a different part of that company, and they're typically in a management or an executive role. Call up that person and say, hey, you know, Janice, George, can you contact procurement for me? Because I haven't been paid in a month and I really need the money. That's going to be really critical. And to me, this was the biggest surprise: is getting paid is much harder than you think. So every month for some period of time, you're going to face some random existential crisis, no matter how much planning you did, but you're going to survive. You're going to get past it. And at some point, they stop happening. And you're not alone in that. And for Grim, I can tell you for the first 2.5 years, once a month, like clockwork, something would come up and we'd be like, oh my God, really? That's a thing? And we'd figure it out and we'd solve it. And at some point, those stop happening. But there's no amount of planning that's going to prevent these random crises from continuing to hit you. Some resources to offer. There's a wonderful Slack out there called Security Founder Slack. It's for founders, but if you are interested to becoming a founder, they have a future founders channel where you can join that and talk to folks. These are just some personal recommendations that I have for things that I've used. Gusto handles all the payroll and benefits in a one-stop Web 2.0 way. Pilot.com, cheap and easy accounting. The downside, why I put an asterisk next to it, is they only talk to you once a month, so it may not be the best for everybody. Why I liked Brex is that they don't tie your credit limit or your credit to your personal credit as a founder. Most other credit card companies, they're going to put it on your personal credit for that. And then any entrepreneur, talk to any entrepreneur, because becoming an entrepreneur is like joining the completely exclusive club where the only requirement is your desire to join, and every member should be willing to help you. What do you got?
Awesome. Awesome,
Questions?
Bryce. We got just a couple minutes here. Let's see what we got for questions. That was a great presentation. I'm sure everybody wants those slides, so we will get those. One thing I want to mention too is we do have a channel in here for everybody who's interested a little more in the consulting stuff. It's called How to Consulting. There's a lot of people in there giving good advice back and forth, not just consulting, for businesses as well. I mean, consulting is basically running your own business. It's just not large scale if you're doing it individually. So I recommend taking a look at that if you're looking for a little more. Bryson, do we have access to your slides? If you wouldn't mind dropping them in this track.
Yeah, how should I do that?
So if is Hannah on this call? If you want, Hannah can email it to us and I'll get it distributed to everybody that way as well.
Yeah, I'll have to probably figure out a way to upload them because it's like
Or
30 some
sorry,
megabytes.
yeah, yeah. No, so you can email it to us probably. Do you have so our email is info@DerpCon. Everybody should have that. So info@derpcon.io. If you just want to email to us, we'll get it out to the attendees if you'd like.
Got it. I will make sure that that happens. If anybody has questions or anything, hit me up. My DMs on Twitter, I think, are open. I don't know, but
So
find me. I will help.
are you in the Discord by chance at all, Bryson?
I am not signed in right now because I actually have to go lecture at a university here in a minute. But I will come back on later this evening.
Awesome. So you have a couple questions in there that since we're coming close on time, if you wouldn't mind coming back and maybe taking a look at them, I can message them to you personally as well. I just want to cover a couple ones in the GoToWebinar that aren't in Discord. So what if a founder does not know about finance management, equity, and money related stuff? Does he or she need to care and learn about that, or just hiring these experts will help?
You do need to care because money is the lifeblood of your company. But that doesn't mean you have to be the expert, right? You as the founder are the drive, are the idea. Accountants, finance, that's back office, that's support. They're there to help you succeed. And so go and talk to them and ask for help. I mean, most of them for free will be like, oh, you should do this, and do this. And by the way, happy to happy to help you if you hire me to bring, do more of this. So don't be afraid to go and ask.